I'm here at the end of the Martin Luther King Jr. event at the Civic Center, sponsored by the NAACP, and I'm talking to Don. Don, give us your full name and which organization you're here with.
So my name is Donald Williams Jr. People call me DJ Williams, and I'm here with the County of Education for Santa Cruz, and we are the county-wide Black Student Union. We have 3 high schools that have Black Student Union: Santa Cruz High, Soquel, and Pajaro Valley, that have active campuses. Recently, we all got together November 14th and did the Ruby Bridges Walk to honor the day that she desegregated the schools. And we're blessed to be here and hopeful for the future.
Did you do the march?
I did do the march. It was really good being able to stand next to the keynote speaker actually today, and next to the president of the NAACP, Elaine Johnson. The NAACP is just doing great work here, and they're really active in the community and really holding people accountable.
So this was also Inauguration Day for President Trump, also our former president. I'm sure you lived through all that. And how are you feeling about today in terms of both MLK Jr. Day and what we're facing?
I think the message that today really drove home is to stay hopeful. With the new administration, I'm still hopeful, and I pray for the best, and we'll see what happens with these next 4 years. But we will survive, we will make it, and together we can do many things. So that's what we should look forward to. Strength and unity and coming together.
Strength and unity and coming together from Donald Williams Jr.
Good evening, everyone. This is Amy Chen Mills with Moment of Truth with Amy Chen Mills on KSQD, your favorite community radio station. Today is January 20th, Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and Moment of Truth was at the MLK March in downtown Santa Cruz, California today in order to totally avoid thinking about the U.S. presidential inauguration, and also to channel our energy into 1, community and unity, 2, positivity, respect, and love, and 3, hope for a better and brighter tomorrow. I do need to mention a few news items which we feel are important here at Moment of Truth. However, we will go from the bad news to the good news. Number 1, Trump's first couple executive orders as president have been to declare there will only be 2 quote-unquote sexes, men and women, that will henceforth be recognized by the federal government, and that all DEI programs will be eliminated from federal agencies. 2, Elon Musk celebrated all of this most appropriately with a Heil Hitler salute at inauguration festivities. And so it goes. Who is surprised? Not me. On to the good news for today. In the morning, Joe Biden commuted the sentence of Indigenous activist Leonard Peltier so that he could serve his remaining term at home and not in federal prison. Activists have been working to free Peltier for decades. This was not a full pardon releasing Peltier from incarceration, but the least that could be done and should have been done decades ago. In other good news, the Martin Luther King Jr. March took place under beautiful blue skies. There were thousands of people there, it seemed to me. I watched as more and more people came around the corner on Cathcart Street and funneled down Pacific Avenue. It was a really large crowd, and I spoke to Amanda Harris Altice, one of the central organizers for the NAACP, and she said the biggest one was in 2008, and this one is probably the second biggest march that they have ever seen on Martin Luther King Jr. Day in Santa Cruz, California. So that's good news. Thanks for showing up, everybody. Now on to our program. Last Thursday, the national group Showing Up for Racial Justice, or SURJ, who we had on our show ahead of the national election back in June. You can see show notes for this episode. We'll have the link on our show notes at the K-Squid website. Well, SURJ hosted the social justice activist and abolitionist Angela Davis on Zoom last week for a talk on the road ahead, gearing up for the new administration. We have gotten permission from SURJ National to air this interview, originally titled Our Work in the Days Ahead, with Davis tonight, exclusively on the Moment of Truth program. Davis is famous for her work with SNCC and the Black Panthers, is author of 9 books, and has lectured worldwide. Davis' most recent books are Abolition Democracy, Are Prisons Obsolete, and The Meaning of Freedom. And here's a little more background on Angela Davis for those of you who aren't so familiar. Angela Davis was born in Birmingham, Alabama in 1944. Birmingham then was one of the most racially segregated cities in the country. Angela's neighborhood was nicknamed Dynamite Hill because the Ku Klux Klan often attacked the homes of black residents there with bombs. With a PhD in philosophy, Davis became involved in the civil rights movement and the work of the Communist Party, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, or SNCC, and the Black Panther Party. In 1969, Angela Davis was fired from UCLA under pressure from then Governor of California, Ronald Reagan. The Supreme Court of California ruled Angela could not be banned for Communist Party affiliation. However, months later, the university found another reason to fire her for incendiary political speeches. At that time, Davis became involved in the Soledad Brothers Defense Committee and was ultimately charged with serious felonies when a gun she owned was used by a supporter of the Soledad Brothers to take hostages in a California courtroom, an incident in which 4 people were killed. Davis went into hiding but finally served 18 months in prison after being labeled a terrorist by President Nixon. Eventually, Davis was acquitted of all charges by an all-white jury in 1972. She taught at the University of California at Santa Cruz in the Department of Consciousness Studies for many years, and she continues to be an unwavering thought leader and advocate for equality for all Americans. Before we get into the interview with Angela Davis, I want to read this statement from Surge founder Carla Wallace, who was on our show back in June. Showing up for racial justice organizes in majority white communities to grow our part of the multiracial movement for change and undermine white support for white supremacy. Surge works in strategic partnership with liberatory BIPOC-led organizations to grow the people power we need. Angela Davis, whose history of fighting for liberation is unparalleled, has had a significant impact on our work. We are honored by her support for the work of Surge. Now, in this interview, and we have 3 different clips of the interview that we will play for you this evening, Angela Davis is interviewed by a young woman who lives, I believe, in Kentucky. Her name is Beth Howard, and she's been organizing white people for some time with a book forthcoming titled Rednecks for Black Lives, a memoir of her work organizing white people in the South from Haymarket Publishers. So here we go with an interview between Beth Howard and the amazing Angela Davis.
I am so grateful to have the opportunity to be in this conversation with you this evening. Dr. Davis, I grew up in rural Eastern Kentucky, and I read about you in college. And you were such an inspiration to me as I was learning about organizing and about revolutionary politics and about feminism. And if someone had told me 25 years ago that we would be here tonight having a political conversation, I would not have believed it. But I am so glad that I am. And so this conversation is for that younger me and for all of the rural Appalachian Southern revolutionaries who, like me, have learned so much from you. And so thank you. It is an honor to talk with you.
Well, thank you so much, Beth. It's really wonderful to meet you. And I look forward to this conversation. Thank you, Grace, for all of your work with Surge. And I have to thank Carla Wallace, whom I've known I've lost track of the number of decades, for so many years, for inviting me to participate in this call.
Yes, I love Carla so much. I'm lucky that I get to be mentored by her. So yes, absolutely. So Dr. Davis, we are 4 days before the inauguration. We know that structural oppression is baked into the fabric of this country from its beginnings, and that people of color, poor people, and others have been living under authoritarian style conditions since the beginning. And we do believe that this election does mark a new era for our country and the world. So, what is new and different now, and what does that mean for our organizing?
Well, as everyone knows, we are experiencing an extremely difficult historical moment. We've suffered some very serious setbacks. And we can't pretend that we have the same momentum we were experiencing 4 years ago when it seemed as if the majority of the people in this country were clearly disassociating themselves from the efforts of right-wing forces to violently retake the White House. But at the same time, I think it's important to remember that nothing ever remains the same. We have witnessed the systematic efforts of right-wingers inside the government and outside to capture leadership positions in the larger society and, of course, within government. And I think on the one hand, we know that we have witnessed this buildup of the ultra-right wing. We saw that the MAGA forces didn't accept defeat 4 years ago, and we have watched them as they've been systematically trying to achieve hegemony in a number of contexts. The attacks on trans people and the larger LGBTQ community. They have systematically turned the Supreme Court into a partisan formation for the right wing. They have been trying their best to transform education. We've witnessed the attacks on critical race theory and, Black studies, ethnic studies. We've watched them try to achieve hegemony at the local level governments. We've watched DEI programs. We might be critical of the fact that DEI was presented to us as the solution to the problem of racism in this country, as opposed to dealing with the structural character of racism. But nonetheless, it stood for efforts to change the country. And we have watched the right wing systematically dismantle these new structures. So I think, I don't know, what would I say? I think on the one hand, we've been a little naive in face of the rise of the ultra-right, because we have actually watched and we have witnessed the building of a movement that's powerful enough to guarantee the re-election of a fascist tyrant. And I think back to that period of the last election, and none of us were really seriously talking about what it might mean for this man to be re-elected. At the same time, we were witnessing the deterioration of the Democratic Party. And many of us have known for a long time that we cannot depend on the Democratic Party, which is, tied to capitalism, the, corporate capitalist formations. And it's never fully aligned with anti-racist and anti-capitalist forces. Let me just say this, because I remember that we we could actually gauge the way in which the Democratic Party was attempting to disassociate itself from progressive forces by the position they took with respect to the working class. Why is it that gradually all conversation about the working class has been replaced within the Democratic Party with conversations about the middle class? That term, working class, was excised from their vocabulary. So, I mean, of course, I could go on, but I'm not trying to say that we are to blame. But I do think that we bear some collective responsibility for not attempting to organize a resistance force earlier. And, even if it doesn't change existing political, economic, social realities, acknowledging what we might have done can help us as we try to chart a path toward the future. And I say this, and I realize that I have to say that without the work of Serge standing up for racial justice, we might be in an even more terrible predicament. Serge and all of the other progressive forces that have, continued to call for radical transformation of our economy, our society, our culture, our political realm. But again, let me say, as I said before, conditions never remain the same. And I want to be critical again of the extent to which we tend in this country oftentimes to assume positions that don't reflect historical consciousness, that don't acknowledge that there is a possibility for change, and this is why we still have movements against racism in this country. This is why the Black movement still exists. If the Black liberation movement had given up during moments like this in the past, we wouldn't be able to say that we have hope for the future. So I want to acknowledge how horrendous our current predicament is, but at the same time, that there are always possibilities for change, and we cannot give up.
Yes. Yes, we cannot give up. And yeah, it just feels so affirming to be here with you, Dr. Davis, and all 4.6 thousand of you all out there. I see all the heart reactions and the claps. And so, Dr. Davis, we are right here with you. And these are the words that we need. And so I'm just so grateful, too, that Serge is continuing this important work. As you were saying, it's going to take all of us and hanging in. And so my next question, Dr. Davis, for decades, you have been a leader in our movement in talking about how Palestinian liberation is a necessary part of liberatory struggle. And part of my work at Serge is organizing majority white Appalachian people to see our shared interest in people of color-led movements for liberation. And over the last 18 months, people from my region have spoken out for Palestinian liberation and a ceasefire, because we really understand that our freedom is tied up together and that we have a common enemy in billionaires and the United States war machine. And as we are entering into a time where, as things continue to intensify, we know we can anticipate that marginalized groups like trans people and immigrants, and issues like a free Palestine will increasingly be under attack. And there's going to be this impulse to, push away those issues and run to the center as an appeal to bring more people in. right? And we know we've seen that happen over and over again, and we know that it's wrong and that it loses. And so we know at Surge that when we ignore talking about race, including issues like trans rights and Palestinian liberation with white people, that it leaves them wide open to propaganda from the far right. And so we also know that we need this broad, united front to win and to bring in as many people as we can. And that includes bringing in lots of people who may not agree with us on many things. And so, how do we not abandon trans rights and immigrant rights and Palestinian liberation while still building the broadest front that we possibly can?
That is the question, isn't it?
It really is.
Because unfortunately, oftentimes when there's conversation about creating united fronts, we think about the lowest common denominator, and therefore, fail to push the most pressing issues of our time. Yeah, I don't know whether there's a formula that will help us solve this problem. But this is the problem we have to confront. And I think that if we look back at the mistakes that movements have made historically, we get a better framework for understanding where we need to go during this period. If we look at the development of the feminist movement, for example, where unfortunately during the early period, not among the most progressive and radical white feminists, but among many, there was the assumption that you could not talk about race because race wasn't related to the general struggle for women's liberation. Because after all, if one thinks about who the majority of women were in that time, or how the movement imagined itself as a women's movement, it was always in terms that were polluted by the supremacy of whiteness. So we should learn, from the way in which the feminist movement emerged, developed, transformed, that its power resides precisely in embracing the most radical potential and the radical possibilities. And today, of course, when one thinks about how the feminist movement is characterized, we think, for example, about intersectionality. We think about, a lot of issues that have come about precisely as a consequence of the work of largely women of color. And that has made the feminist movement as a whole stronger. But as I said before, I don't think that there are any formulas. That some of this work has to be improvised and shared. So yeah, as I was saying, I think we need to not be afraid to improvise. We know what we need to do, but we don't necessarily know how we need to go about creating these alliances and attracting larger numbers of people into our movement. And historically, when one thinks about the promises of the South, which was, where the Civil War was fought, and the promises that arose when the racists were defeated. And they were not only promises for Black people, there were promises for poor people, for working class people as well. And I, always like to bring up the example that it was Black people who, in struggling for the right to education in the aftermath of the Civil War, first introduced public education to the South, and therefore made it possible for poor white people, poor white children to get an education. And so I think, we need to change the narrative and find ways in which we can come together, not based on what we might all assume we all believe at a particular moment, but what might hold most promise, more promises for a habitable future.
Yes, people have at times asked me, working at Surge, like, have you had to give up things working for racial justice? And I can honestly say no, but even if I did, it has opened up and given me so much, and it has that potential for all of us. And so, absolutely.
And oftentimes we assume that if we want to come together, unite, build alliances, coalitions, that we have to find the lowest common denominator. We have to start with what we can all agree on. And we use these metaphors of coming together across differences, and coming together despite our differences. But I think that misleads us in many ways, because it's oftentimes precisely our differences that bring a richness to our efforts to unify. Who wants to get the same old, same old? Every time we build alliances or friendships or whatever. I think that the reimagining of differences as that which can bring us together, as opposed to that which will inevitably pull us apart, is an issue that we all have to deal with.
I love that. Important words of wisdom as we are organizing. So, as I've said, probably at least 5 times already, I am a native Kentuckian, a Southerner. And I direct tenant organizing in my home state. And Surge was also founded in the South, as you mentioned, your friendship with Carla Wallace. And Surge has chosen the South as a strategic priority for our organizing in majority white, rural, small towns in the South. And so, as a fellow Southerner, which we are saying loud and proud and repeatedly, I would, can you talk to us a little bit about like the importance of the South and Appalachia and rural places in our strategies?
Well, I think the South is really central. As we know, there are many historical characteristics that are still very much alive in the South. I think that in many ways we see the worst of what is possible, and at the same time we see the best of what is possible. And so therefore, if we can address these questions in the South, that will help us to imagine a better future, not only for the country, because I think we also need to question the extent to which we rely on this notion that the nation state is the most effective mode of community for humans. Because I think that at some point, if the Earth lasts that long enough, then we will be talking about abolishing the nation state, and we won't have the kinds of borders that prevent people who are from other countries from seeking to build a better life here. So yeah, I think that I think that we have to nurture our imagination. Let me put it that way, so that we're not persuaded that our chances for the future are defined by this narrow set of terms that seem to characterize what we are experiencing now. And I think the South can help us do this because in my own experience, the most committed and the most powerful anti-racists are those who have experienced it and who are familiar with it and who have not been afraid to acknowledge its existence. And that would mean the South. But at the same time, I think that the South has suffered from deindustrialization. And, when I look at the city where I grew up in Birmingham. And, not in a rural area, although my people, my mother and father both came from rural areas in Alabama. But Birmingham, of course, was known for such a long time as, one of the industrial centers of the country, actually, because of the steel industry. And now the only steel mill that's left in Birmingham is a museum. And so, when we talk about deindustrialization and the ways in which capitalists have migrated to capitalist concerns have migrated to other countries, not in order to fulfill perceived needs, but in order to get more profit. And, we're seeing the same thing happening with people like, Musk, and, we can talk about Mark Zuckerberg. We can talk about, all of these billionaires, these figures who are promoting the notion that the most important needs are the economic needs of the billionaires, and leaving the workers, the people who make our life possible, leaving them completely at the mercy of poverty and homelessness. Whether they are born in this country or born outside of this country and migrate here in order to try to find a better life.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. So, Dr. Davis, we're all looking for hope and lessons. And so could you share a couple lessons from other change movements who have organized under repression and authoritarianism here and abroad?
Well, we were talking about Palestine and how important Palestine has become to progressive movements in this country. What the lesson that Palestine offers us, that the people of Palestine under occupation, that lesson is that you never stop resisting. Even under the most dire circumstances, you continue to resist. And I think that message is one that we here in the U.S. Need to hear, especially now, and especially with the need to guarantee that this ceasefire is real. We're not sure what's going to be happening in the next few days. But we have to, not only continue support the people of Gaza and of Palestine, but to recognize that the reverberations inside the country and the impact of Zionism and the extent to which people have been pursued as if it were the McCarthy era again, because of the fact that they're trying to organize movements on campuses or teach their students. Students and faculty alike are being targets, and the use of anti-Semitism, not as because of its kinship with racism, but to use it within the framework of a racist strategy. And so, I think that that what may be so important for us here in this country, even as we are experiencing this extremely depressing political moment, is to remember that so many people have experienced far worse in so many other countries, and to call upon those experiences and to, recognize that if the Palestinians have been able to sustain themselves over, all of these decades, then they have lessons that we can learn from. Read Rashid Khalidi's book, The 100-Year War on Palestine, and you get a sense of the extent to which the movement has rekindled itself over and over, which kind of mirrors what has happened with the Black movement in this part of the world, not only here in the U.S., but in other parts of the Americas as well.
Yeah, I'm going to hold that close. The rekindling of movements and to never stop resisting. I have one last question. So, Dr. Davis, people are looking for a silver bullet or a quick fix right now instead of the long haul base building organizing that we are committed to at Surge, the kind of work that you've been in for decades. So what will it take to actually stay in this work for the long haul?
Well, it takes a sense of history and a recognition that we are who we are as individuals, as collectives, only because of these, only because of what progressive struggles have achieved in the world. I think that's individualism that is so dangerous and so profound, so central to the self-image of the United States and other capitalist countries, has to be challenged, has to be made visible and challenged. And I don't think that we can participate in that kind of long haul if we're focused too much on ourselves, if we're focused too much on what is happening to a defined group of people whom we consider our communities right now. And again, this is why it has been so important to develop the ties with the Palestinian movement, because I think this is probably the first really deep and significant solidarity movement that we have experienced since South Africa. And when you look at South Africa, And it's important that South Africa is playing a major role on the international terrain, defending Palestine's South Africa and Ireland and Colombia. We have to learn how to imagine ourselves as a part of that a larger framework, as a part of that, as a part of the world, and not only in terms of humans, I always like to say, but in terms of the earth and the earth that is being destroyed, and the animals and the plants. And so I think in order for us to engage in that kind of a long struggle, a struggle of longue durée, we have to imagine ourselves as much bigger than we think we are, as much larger than we are accustomed to imagining ourselves. And that is as connected to life, whether it's animal life or plant life, connected to a universe that we know so little about, yet that the billionaires are polluting with their space travel, SpaceX, the SpaceX rocket that just blew up today. And don't let me start talking about the billionaires. So, yeah, I think that there is promise, and we are that promise. And we have to transform ourselves in the process of transforming the structures, evicting racism from the structures of our society, homophobia, and transphobia, and all of the ways in which human beings have both been the target of and the perpetrators of this these terrible ways of destroying the earth.
Thank you so much. I am going to hold on, to this quote from you. In order for us to engage in that kind of long struggle, we have to imagine ourselves as much bigger than we think we are. This was right on time and right what we needed. So let's all show Dr. Davis love. Thank you so much. This has been so, so wonderful. And I'm grateful that we're all facing what's ahead together.
And thank you so much for the work that you're doing. I'm learning from you today. And my hope comes from you.
Yes, we are all bigger together. We really are.
That was Beth Howard, who is an organizer in the South for Showing Up for Racial Justice, a national organization organizing white people to overcome white supremacy. And she has a book coming out called Rednecks for Black Lives. She was interviewing Angela Davis, who most of you probably know. We introduced Angela Davis in depth at the top of the hour. And now we have Kathy Lass with us in studio. She is a member of Surge Santa Cruz Local. Kathy, welcome to our studio.
Thank you, Amy. It's nice to be here.
And I just also have to remind everyone that you are listening to KSQD at 89.5, 89.7, and 90.7 FM in Prunedale and Santa Cruz and across the California Central Coast. Now, Kathy, I wanted to ask you just personally, and we're going to mention a few organizations that people can get involved with, but we're going to start with Surge because Surge presented this webinar with Angela Davis. What drew you to Surge?
During the first Trump presidency, I was horrified day after day. I had a job that was a little overwhelming, and I had some economic freedom to leave the job and look for how could I get involved in real life. And someone who'd attended Black Lives Matter rallies told me about Surge. And so I joined a local Surge chapter up in the Bay Area, up in Oakland, for a year. And when I had the chance to move down to Santa Cruz County, I found the local chapter. So we're not just Santa Cruz, we're Santa Cruz County. So I just want to highlight that we're from south to north.
Oh, that's right. Okay. And so as a white person, how did you become interested in the struggles of people who are subject to racism? And, you know, I mean, mostly racism, I think Surge works on, but of course we have lots of marginalized people out there.
Right. I understood that some of the problem with like why we were where we were was because of racism, of some of the structural racism that was built in even in our Constitution from day one.
Yeah.
And so that's what drew me to finding a group that was looking specifically at how to dismantle white supremacy and dismantle the structural racism that we have.
Okay, so it wasn't any personal event in your life. It was more that you had studied these issues and learned about them.
Yes, and the people around me pointing out like the police brutality that was happening and how strongly that was, like how racist that was, and how our mass incarceration system here in California was completely racist. And I didn't know that. So just even having a sense of fairness meant looking at the structural racism and finding a group that addressed it.
Okay. And so now I'm hearing you're pretty on top of what's happening nationally with Surge. I know they have this sort of circle program where there are several circles locally developing and engaged in work. But tell me what Surge is trying to do at the national level. When I spoke to Carla about this show, Carla Wallace, the founder of Surge, she said, I'm excited and hopeful. I'm like, well, good. Because a lot of us aren't. So tell us what's happening that she would be excited and hopeful.
Right. So I think from all the groups, they're all saying act locally. So have conversations locally. And Surge's whole point is to have white people bring in white people to this work. I think the key thing is that the right has organized white suffering through racism and misogyny, and it's our job to bring our cousins back in to offer them a different pathway to power, to point out the multiracial solidarity is our way to have our power and to address white suffering. So I think that's the idea, is that the right organized one way, and we can organize and bring them back.
Okay, interesting. So you were saying the right organized white suffering around racism. Is that what you were saying?
Right.
Okay, gotcha. I just was reading an interesting article that a friend of mine shared with me, actually one of our MOT team members. She shared an article that it's actually not like the poorest white people who are so supportive of Trump and MAGA. It's actually like better off white people in these poorer areas, like the January 6th folks, the insurrectionists. A lot of them came from they weren't poor people. A lot of them had a lot of money. Some of them were flying in on private planes, staying in hotels, but it had more to do with like they were just seeing in their communities that the white population was dwindling. Isn't that interesting?
It's very interesting.
Yeah. So maybe there is hope in organizing people who are working class or impoverished, actually.
Well, I think it's the right has been they've been finding scapegoats. So they've been preying on people's resentment or fear or suffering and finding a scapegoat, and usually using othering groups like immigrants and black and brown people
and trans people. Yeah.
And so but we know that that's not true, so it's really trying to find the people whose interests are aligned with us but who are confused about who to blame.
Interests aligned with us, but confused about who to blame. And I wonder if now, I've heard now that Elon Musk is so involved in this administration, everyone knows he's a billionaire, maybe even a trillionaire by now. I don't remember. He's like the wealthiest man in the world. And, there are a lot of other billionaires, I think 13 in the Trump administration. So I've heard that a lot of MAGA folks are starting to feel a bit disgruntled, and they weren't able to see the inauguration, but all these wealthy people were able to get indoors with Donald Trump. So I don't know. That's sort of where I pin some of my hope. And so what would, if someone wanted to get involved with Surge, wherever they are, I know the website is surj.org. That's the national website. What would they find themselves doing?
So, like right now, we are at the tail end of this 10-week program of circles. So, that's getting the people who have joined that so far skills for organizing and getting ready for actions to come and organizing that's to come. But at the very least, they can sign up for this Wednesday's national training called This Wednesday at 5 p.m. And if you can't make it at 5 p.m., you can register and still get the recording later.
Okay.
And that starts to give you some political education, as well as it starts to give you a taste of organizing skills. Locally, we're having a Zoom meeting. Our local chapter is having a Zoom meeting on Thursday night, and so you can start to get find people in community. So I think the biggest thing is finding your political home and finding people to be in community with and to start to organize with. And so that's another option. And that'll be at 7:00 on Zoom. And we have a link tree with links to all of this, which is linktr.ee at Surge Santa Cruz County. So linktr.ee/Surge Santa Cruz County, all one word. And that's one way they can plug right in right away.
Okay, go to the link tree, or can they just also go to a website?
So you can go to surge.org. Sometimes it's just harder to navigate.
Okay, to find Santa Cruz County.
Oh, sorry, surge.org. National, I'm sure you can find how to register for this webinar, but surgesantacruzcounty.org is our local website.
Okay.
So that's you can find the way to register for our Thursday night call.
Okay, and before all this interest came in around the election, because there have been, I think, 10 new Surge circles in the county since the election have organized themselves. What were you all working on locally? Because there was a Surge chapter. I know that very well, and I'm actually friends with a lot of people in Surge. And so, what have you guys been working on?
So we have the Rainbow Defense Coalition. So that's one way to plug in and be like a visual barrier for drag story time and other LGBTQ events to show up and allow them to have their joy for their events. We've been organizing against building a new jail and doing study and action around that, which led us into getting to really know the budget so that we can advocate for spending on health and mental health and education instead of carceral ways.
Prevention and not incarceration.
Right,
Gotcha.
Right. And we have our newsletter, which is one way to be plugged in not only to our events, but to related events across the county, and to be to know what's going on with like the various BIPOC organizations and the various LGBTQ organizations.
Okay, great. Okay, well, we're getting close to the 5-minute mark, and I want to talk about some other organizations people can look into and join. Is there anything else you want to add about Surge?
No, it's just one of the many political homes, like we heard this morning at the MLK March, that find what your passion is and spend your time there. And you can do it locally if you can. I think like really connecting with people locally is one of the main ways to have these conversations and pull each other in from this like resentment or entitlement that's getting stoked by the right.
Yeah, thank you very much. I actually go to the Surge Circle sometimes because I'm like, I just can't be alone in this, you know. And I do have activist friends, but I know that there's a circle that's going to be, every week or every other week where I can sit down with like-minded people. Thank you so much, Kathy Lass from Showing Up for Racial Justice, Santa Cruz County. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And I just want to also mention that there are several other national groups that you can join that have groups and circles and gatherings. Indivisible is one of them that's very active. The Indivisible Santa Cruz website is www.indivisibleSantaCruzCounty.com. I'm sure there's an Indivisible in your city. If it's a large enough city, there might not be one in every city, but check out the Indivisible website nationally, and I'm sure you can find your area. Also, Red, Wine, and Blue has a series of groups, a series or a collection of groups across the country called Trouble Nation. I was just on one of their webinars. You can go to redwine.blue. to find where they're meeting in your area too. We interviewed Force Multiplier when we interviewed Carla Wallace. And they're doing an excellent job of trying to get dollars where they can help the most, and with grassroots organizations that are trying to get out the vote or working like Surge in community building and organizing and changing people's minds. People's Action is also another amazing organization that does deep canvassing, deep listening to people's issues and concerns, and also tries to help change people's minds. And I just want to wrap this all up by saying that we interviewed Starhawk was our last interview, the permaculture author and earth-based spiritual leader. Her interview has now been posted at the KSQD archives and at all your podcast sites. You can find us at Moment of Truth with Amy Chen Mills at Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts. Moment of Truth gives many, many thanks to our team, Nyanko Nyasu, sound and tech engineer, and our research and production team, Nyanko, Mei-Ling Obinata, Joy Schendeldecker, Vara Ramakrishnan, and Todd Zimmerman. Todd Zimmerman of Nativeverse Studios created the theme song. Kathy Krizik created our logo. Find our podcast of the show and many others at all your favorite podcast sites under Moment of Truth with Amy Chen Mills. Episode notes and links to resources are at our program pages at www.ksqd.org. Thanks to our KSQD program manager, Howard Feldstein, and the entire KSQD team on the California Central Coast where the show originates. Thank you for tuning in to Moment of Truth. Please contact us at Amy, A-M-I, at ksqd.org with questions or comments. And remember, if we don't use our democracy, we lose our democracy. Let us pray it is not too late. Good night, everybody.